Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to see you after. I'm going to see you after the meeting. Okay. Good afternoon. I understand there are no public speakers. Is that correct? Okay. Could I have a approval of the minutes, please? Second. All in favor? So approved. Okay. What do I do now? Here we go. Work plan. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, there are no changes to the work plan, but as per your direction, we are trying to align the risk assessments with the work plan. And until we probably, it looks like in January, we'll be able to have the risk assessments for the comparable CPOC agenda item in line. But until then, we'll be off, out of line with the actual items. But the Carter Burgess reports will still reflect the work plan items. And you've all been handed a copy of the risk assessment summary, which also reflects the agenda on the left, and the risk assessments are going to be done on the right.
Any questions, comments? Linda, we ready for you? Linda? Oh, commitments and completions update, please. Tab 2.
Thank you.
You're on.
MTA committed $1.24 billion through June. This is 52% of the plan. Commitments of $2.38 billion. New York City Transit committed $661 million, or 50% of its plan of $1.32 billion. This is primarily due to slippage in award of the two station Brighton line rehabs for $47 million. The Bleecker Street station rehab and transfer for $64 million have both been delayed until July, pending approval of a plan amendment. As reported last month, procurement of 126 express buses for $73 million has also slipped to July. Modernization of two Queens Boulevard line interlockings for $98 million has slipped to September. And finally, purchase of 190 articulated buses for $69 million and the 207th Street shop expansion for $145 million, pending a plan amendment, are to be deferred to the next capital plan. Long Island Railroad committed $241 million, or 84% of its plan of $286 million. This is primarily due to delay in Phase 2 of the Jamaica fit-out for $8 million until July, and Jamaica interlocking reconfiguration study for $6 million until September. Metro North committed $79.4 million, or 90% of its plan. Capital Construction committed $222 million, or 50% of its plan of $442 million. This is primarily due to slippage in award of the Madison Yard demolition for $67 million until August, and the Harrell Interlocking Central Instrument location for $41 million until September. Bridges and Tunnels committed $31.6 million, or 18% of its plan of $174 million. This is primarily due to delay in award of Throgs Neck Bridge concrete deck replacement for $66 million until July, and the Triborough Bridge Building 104 rehab for $60 million until October. MTA Bus committed $7.4 million, or 12% of its plan of $63 million. This is primarily due to delay in award of engineering design services for $5 million until July, and construction management services until August, and delay in the joint purchase of 72 articulated buses for $46 million with New York City Transit, as discussed above, to be deferred to the next capital plan. Completions. MTA completed $1.03 billion through June. This is 46% of the plan completions. New York City Transit completed $882 million, or 59% of its plan of $1.49 billion. This is primarily due to delayed completion of the Bergen Street solid state interlocking pilot project for $72 million until July, completion of ATS automatic train supervision for the A Division for $208 million until September. As noted earlier, this project, however, is in beneficial use. Furnished signal equipment for upcoming signal projects for $38 million until November. Acceptance or backlog of 14 R160B division cars for $14 million until December, and Sonnet ATMA for $197 million until June 2009. The risk assessment done for this project will be presented today. Long Island Railroad completed $18 million, or 10% of its plan of $180 million. Richmond Hill improvements for $23 million are delayed until July. Atlantic Terminal for $100 million until December, and M3 car overhaul for $26 million until February 2009. The M3 cars are related to the delivery and installation of components and for toilets. Metro-North completed $23.5 million, or 76% of its plan of $31 million. This is due to delayed acceptance of Comet and indoor coaches for $7.5 million until December. Capital Construction completed $51 million, or 11% of its plan of $464 million. This is primarily due to delayed completion of the South Ferry Terminal structure for $292 million, and the Battery Place Vent Plant for $25 million until October, pending acceptance of New York City Transit Elite Plan. Bridges and Tunnels completed $50.5 million, or 80% of its plan of $63 million. This is due to delayed completion of the Operations Center for $16 million until August. That's my plan.
Thank you. Okay, we're
Point.
ready for any questions. Yes, sir.
I was certainly taken aback by the 52% transit transit performance, or 50%, I should say, 52% overall on commitments. Just a point of operational oversight. When we get into these kinds of deferrals and/or slippages, are they being taken up with the appropriate agency committees before they get here, so that the comments from this is not the only place that these are being reviewed?
I can't answer that, but Mr. Blair, as you know, most of this impact has to do with deferrals, so I would imagine that's part of the plan amendment which was discussed today. Somebody from Transit, was it Transit Committee?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, we
least
do
most
have
of it.
some that are deferred into the next 5-year plan, and again, I mean, that seems like a significant item which can happen in the ordinary course, but it's important that we understand where that is being dealt with at the in the first instance. Because if it rests with this committee, I'll raise questions, but I don't want to step on other committees' toes.
Connie, you do a completion and commitment report every month to your operating committee as part of your capital program overview? Okay.
Thank you.
One quick question. The deferral of the vent plan for Jackson Avenue, does that present any safety security issues? Are we in compliance with everything we need to be in compliance with at that particular location?
We asked as part of the amendment for Transit to comment on that for any deferrals that the board might have that question on, and Transit assured us that it did not do so, that there are things they want to do, and they've stepped up efforts to remove things that could create fire and smoke hazards, and will intend to do them in the next program. Connie, you want to say anything else?
I just wanted the folks on this committee to hear that as well.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah. Which one are you going to do?
I think on the agenda is the presentation.
Okay,
Let me just say, I'm sorry. We're going to take something that wasn't originally planned to be on the agenda, as the chairman has pointed out in a memo to everybody. We are attempting for a series of projects to look at them a little differently than we have in the past, and so what we're going to talk to you about now is a process, the risk assessment process that we're planning to put into place, and the different elements of it, and Ron, and in conjunction with Fred and others from New York City Transit, Ron will give you the overview, and then we'll talk about how we've applied this to one particular project, not the full quantitative, but a sort of a hybrid, and what the results were.
I think the committee needs to understand that this is a basic change in what we're going to be covering in this committee from before till now till later. This is a work in progress. It isn't meant to be a final way we're going to do it. But instead of just dealing with pretty pictures and what we've done and everybody oohing and eyeing at all the lovely trains and all that we do, this is going to be based on how we are performing all our different major projects.
Right, and the expectation is this will allow us to bring you the major risks that are in front of a project, potential mitigations, and then when we come back to you, rather than sort of re-going over all the aspects of the project, we'll be coming back to you in relation to, as we pass risk milestones, how we did against those risks, whether we were able to mitigate them. So you'll, I think, have a clear sense of what the project is struggling with or not struggling with, and to the extent that costs and or schedules change, what's behind that. And we'll also be able to tell you, when we do a full assessment, the full range of potential costs and potential dates for projects, so that if we choose to, let's say it's the 90th percentile that we want to put in, and I'm getting a little ahead of the cost and the schedule, you'll understand whether we're able to mitigate to expect it to come in lower than that, or whether all the risks that we were hoping we could avoid happen and we don't, and we're going to come in higher. So it'll allow you all, I think, to influence how the project proceeds as well.
Would you also be letting us know how close to schedule you think these projects are, not just, how close to the cost?
Yes, in fact, you'll see when we go over today, part of this was to help the board. The item that we're choosing today was to help the board in seeing, sort of taking into account all the elements that are left in a project, and coming up with a schedule that we think accurately reflects the work that has to proceed for the project to come in, so that you don't keep hearing about it with a stepwise progression to where we expect it to actually be, but where we actually expect it to be.
Thank you.
Is this a Monte Carlo risk simulation model? Is this basically what it is, or?
The answer to that is, for this particular risk assessment, the answer is no, and let me explain why in a minute. Monte Carlo risk assessments are basically done for early stage design before construction is started. This particular project, the history of this project, or in particular three of the IT projects we're going to be looking at, is that month after month after month we slip the date. And so we're in the late stage of construction.
Right. Let me just, when we do the schedule that we handed out to you, Ron's going to, we're sort of jumping, if Ron can do his presentation, because all the new risk assessments on new projects will be the full 90 yards, Monte Carlo risk, all of that will be in the new ones. It's just, I was like, this is one of two hybrids that we're going to tell you about.
This is a new process, so I wanted to get involved with it quickly, so we're picking a hybrid, but eventually it will be what you're talking about, full drill. Yes, Susan?
Well, I think this is a wonderful approach to be taking, because risk assessment is the basis for the way private industry goes ahead with making decision. And the advantage it brings to the board is that you'll see the basis for decisions being made and understand the upside and downside risks of each of those. So to me, it provides us with information that we really need in order to do a careful and thorough job of oversight. So I'm glad this is here.
Could I just introduce the folks here so you'll know? We've
Absolutely.
got Fred Smith.
Raise your hand.
Fred Smith is Program Officer for all projects and signals and systems. Craig Stewart, to my right, is the Chief Officer for Capital Programs for the Department of Subways. So he is the one who accepts these projects on behalf of the Department of Subways. Mark Beanstalk is the program manager for communications projects in the Division of Signals and Systems. Diane Morganroth is with the General Counsel's office at the Transit Authority. And then we've got, Jerry Gold and Jerry Gardovitz of Carter Burgess down at the far end of the table. Everybody here has been involved in the process, including most of the people sitting in the audience there, who I won't introduce if that's all right.
Okay, next, Tom. Basically, as we said, as an outgrowth of the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations, and in order to do a better job, for the reasons Susan very well put, we adopted risk assessment. I must remind everyone, for those of you that are familiar with risk assessment, there are many types of risk assessment. There are qualitative risk assessments, quantitative risk assessments, and so depending on the application, we choose the methodology. We will not be doing any qualitative risk assessment for any projects here. There will be quantitative to some degree or another. So basically, the information that will be presented will be information that provides range of estimates from budgets and schedules, confidence level, whether 90% confidence level or 80% or whatever we're choosing and why we're choosing it. We'll come to you with that explanation. Any upcoming risk events or those that may have passed, so that you can be aware of whether or not we were able to mitigate the risk or our preparation for that risk. And then any, of course, notable changes to design. Basically, the risk assessments are tailored to the project phase being evaluated. We're applying three variations here. The first one is a new project assessment, which is a qualitative risk assessment, full qualitative, Monte Carlo. The first project you'll see with that will be the Culver Line project. Culver Line is a structural rehab of a viaduct as well as a signal. Well, I guess you remember from last time it was presented, the description was presented here. That is ongoing currently. The next category we have is called mega project reviews, and these are basically be the mega projects. So if we look at the schedule here, and then the final one would be the IT project reviews. Again, these are for late-stage critical construction projects where we need to improve our budget and schedule forecasts. The term semi-quantitative there has to do with the fact that we are using the principles and some of the procedures in a risk assessment, but as I said, due to the late stage of the project, it's difficult now to establish probabilities on durations that we know are bad anyway, and we're trying to come to grips with some sort of confidence in those durations and costs. So on the handout, you'll see. Oh, I'm sorry, information technology. These are the tech projects. Well, these are the tech projects, right? This is the ones that you saw the slipped. It's Sonnet. It's going to be PACIS, and it's going to be ATMB, which we'll get into in a minute. But anyway,
I just, before Ron moves on, I just also wanted to take a moment. You remember when we were doing the accelerated 8 to 13 program, we determined new costs and baselines for the mega projects, and we indicated that we were going to follow it up with mitigation exercises. So what we're proposing on those projects is before select large contracts go out on that, we're going to do a mitigation exercise to help ensure that those elements that go out stay within cost and budget and understand all the risks associated with them. So we'll be bringing those to you as we move along as well.
Yes, I was going to, I will come back to that in a little more detail on the subsequent slide. But I just wanted to point out that in the handout, we have the type of risk assessment listed on the right-hand column. So the IT correlates to those three tech projects that I mentioned. The mega projects are the, obviously, Second Avenue Subway, 7 West, East Side Access, and thank you, Fulton Street. And then the new projects are projects, like we said, Culver will be the first one. There'll be others. And you'll see on the second page The Jackson Avenue fan plant that Commissioner Frasca mentioned is scheduled. The Jackson Avenue, that's shown on second page. Oh, I'm sorry, that line. Sorry, Commissioner Albert. Okay. Basically, we talk about risk-based approaches. First of all, I'd like to say that the risk assessment's an art. It's not a science, it's an art. And really the two important elements for risk assessment are the facilitators, how good the facilitator is in getting the information out of people and getting cooperation, participation. As Connie mentioned, there are a lot of people in this room that participate. We try to get all the stakeholders involved, because without all the stakeholders, we're going to be missing information. Doing a poor job on estimating whether a risk is 10% or 20% is not as important as making sure we have the risk identified. So that's important. And the second thing that we believe is of critical importance is an integrated schedule model. Schedule drives cost. We've seen that over and over again. So we need to start with a schedule, an integrated schedule model. Those are the key issues. So you'll see for the new projects, we talk about our integrated cost and schedule risk model. What basically means we draw a logic diagram of the schedule. The cost elements are tied to those logic diagrams. The risks are associated with the various elements. And then we run our simulations to see how that moves, how it's impacted. We develop base element ranges, costs and schedules, a single point cost, a single point schedule. Don't mean much in terms of each of the durations. So each of them has a range. For example, if something costs $750,000, doesn't mean it costs $750,000. It means it could cost $650,000 to, say, $800,000. So rangeability. Okay, and then there's also the risk elements. We identify risk elements. We can't pick a single. Well, it's 20% confidence it's going to slip 3 weeks. No, well, the various percentages and impacts. Because we know risk is equal to the probability times the consequence. And then so each of those, the ranges basically are relative distributions. They're plotted in terms of the risk curves you saw in March when I made the presentation. Whereas the next one is cumulative ranges. So the cumulative takes those distribution curves and puts it into a less than curve, which says that if you want something to be less than $1 billion on the curve, you can basically identify that it's a 90% likelihood that it will be less than $1 billion. And that helps you establish the confidence level. Okay, so they all roll up together. And then basically, with those curves, we have all the information behind it that says these risks are the key drivers in that, right? Not all the risks make an impact, but what are the key drivers? And those are the ones we try to go after in terms of establishing some sort of mitigation strategy and to control the costs. The mega project risk mitigation is the same, essentially, except, as I say here, we apply it to component projects. The mega projects it's a misnomer. They're really programs, aren't they? Eastside Access, it's many projects. So we're currently doing a risk assessment for Queens Eastside Access CQO 31, which is a soft ground tunneling project. Now, the risk assessment will be very similar, except we're in the procurement phase now, so there's no need to basically do the base curve variation, but we will do the risk variations, plus we're looking at the variation of the cost and schedule risks, full integrated model. And when we finish with that, we'll have a better feel for the risks and the mitigations needed for CQO 31. And the second point is that output then will be put into the integrated overall project schedule, and we'll have to have another discussion, which we will do before we come to the board in October, I believe, November, to present the results to see how that project impacts the overall project, the overall program, Eastside Access completion. Okay? Okay, then the last element, the last element, the IT projects, again, here the essential starting point is we basically have a project that's been going on for a while. We've lost confidence in the ability to forecast completion. And so basically the schedule we have is something that we need to revisit. And again, just as the other two, the key driver here is the schedule, right? So we need to come up with a way of establishing a schedule that we could all have some relative degree confidence in. And here we use the risk methodology by saying, look, here's a duration of various activities. What's on 90% confidence level? Okay, this shows 5 days. Are we 90% confident? 9 chances in 10 that we're going to be able to deliver this activity in 5 days? Well, if not, what is it? So then there's discussion and consensus, and we come up with some sort of consensus-based schedule, and we run that model, and the durations, of course, increase. And I might say that for the lake project, since there are very few activities left, we're adding the risks. So as opposed to the first two projects, where not all risks, if 2 risks impact a particular schedule, you don't necessarily add the risks. You do some sort of combined impact of the risks. It's a simulation, basically. But whereas, because we're late in the game here, every risk is added together, and therefore it's a more conservative approach to forecasting. Okay, this is the document that you have in front of you. Basically, it's just a quick snapshot. I just want to point out that, as I said, we're a little out of sequence. In September, the Long Island Railroad and Bridges and Tunnels capital plan are slated to come up, and they will be in the book. Carter Burgess will continue to write the reports in the book on those projects. You can discuss risks or issues associated with those projects. However, we will be, again, discussing the next technology project, which has been discussed several times, the PACIS for the A Division stations. That will be followed by a new risk assessment. That's the Culver line and 4th Avenue interlocking. In November, MTA is here, so we're very lucky. We happen to be able to get back online with the risk assessments for those. Those are full, essentially, risk assessments for a project within the program. In the case of Fulton Street, we'll be doing the mezzanine and the importance of the mezzanine, how it ties into all the other packages. So it'll be a good way of looking at the remaining packaging plan. And then in December, Transit's back again with ATMB. And if you look then at the handout I gave you, we're back on sequence from January on, because these take time. So, Tom? Okay. I'll stop talking.
Okay, so translation. This is our first attempt to be able to answer the question, is it on time, is it on budget, on a timely manner, as opposed to being surprised somewhere along the project that either something's going wrong or everything's going right. This is not going to be perfected overnight, but the object is so that the board will know and the staff will know, given reasonable outcomes of time, whether projects are on time and on budget, so that we should not be surprised at the end that we're out of budget $6 billion, where we've all been. This will take a while to sort out, but it's on time and on budget. Every time I get a report on the 2nd Avenue subway or East Side Line, I get graphs and stuff, and I go back and I send a memo back. Is it on time or on budget? I mean, that's what we really want to know, and this is what we're seeking to answer by this project.
So, Mr. Chairman, once we know that it is or it isn't on time and on budget, what does that enable us to do about the situation? I mean, it's not going to change what all of you were going to do vis-a-vis the project anyway, correct?
It basically, Commissioner, gives you an opportunity to identify what the risks are and put a plan in place and communicate to you what we're doing to mitigate those risks. So you'll see what Fred's going to be talking about here, the outside cost. There are still opportunities to try to mitigate, to come back from that number.
In the case of Fulton Center, which obviously has political overtones and is still awaiting a decision on the structure there, we're still going to be nowhere until that situation is rectified. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, we won't be commenting on the above-ground structure. It'll be basically the mezzanine, which again,
it'll be the stuff that we have control over.
Correct.
In other words,
at this point, and we're moving forward on that packaging plan.
Just 2 points. As you said, I think in the beginning, it really is very highly, the output is highly dependent on what you're putting in the model, garbage in, garbage out. So the quality of the data and the quality of the assumptions that you're making are very critical to this. Secondly, just remembering my high school statistics, which was a very long time ago, results tend to cluster around the mean. So finding those outliers, the things that have a greater chance of not coming out the way we'd like them to, something that might have a 10% chance of happening. We probably need to make a decision about what degree of probability we're going to start having contingency strategies to address the possibility of having that bad outcome. So that's also an important
Absolutely.
part of the exercise.
Absolutely. In fact, that will be when we talk about Culver. In the March presentation, we did address some of those issues in the Blue Ribbon report. There was some recommendation, Blue Ribbon panel, about acceptability criteria. But when we get into a real full-blown risk assessment, will be Culver. We'll get into every one of those issues you just talked about.
And Carter Burgess is here to make sure that we don't have garbage in, garbage out. I mean, that's our outside check. I mean, everybody's going to be involved with this. This is not just our guys. We want them to be a part of it, too.
That's one of the things that I think marks this as different than something we've done in the past is the way we're treating these is the assessments are a function of full consensus, and getting everyone at the table, which is, so it's not just CPM, it's CPM and all the owners and users of whatever the end product is with Carter Burgess, with oversight, so that, there's a lot of challenging each other about whether all the risks have been identified, whether the likelihood of the risks are being accurately reflected, and a lot of back and forth in that, which I think makes it a much more rigorous going in process. And the other thing I wanted to say is the idea here is do it, you're not doing it once. You're doing the initial one and then you're doing updates, so that we would regularly be coming to you and saying, here's where we stand against where we had hoped to be now, and here's whether we pass this risk or not. So, so to the extent things are moving off, it'll be very clear what's going on. We're a little bit locked in because we have to put numbers on projects before we've actually typically done this kind of exercise. So you'll also be able to know when we start if we put a number on a project, based on a full risk assessment, is that number at the 90th percentile, or are we talking we budgeted for it at the 60th percentile? And then, so the board will be able to actually weigh in on what you want to do about that, because it means it's more likely than not you're going to need to add more money to it. So, and if we get some of these done before the program on the large ones, it will influence how we budget them in the next program. So,
Mark?
Time risk.
There's not much left of this presentation, and then there's very little after that. It's kind of just questions.
I'm short.
Jerry?
I just wanted to confirm that we were a participant in this risk, that we've been participants in the other risks that have been done. In fact, when we have been doing the mega projects, it is a sub-consultant to Carter Burgess that is the facilitator of the risk assessment. And he is an excellent facilitator, and he does ensure that people think to the extremes, because the key in this, as you said, Ms. Frasca, is the range, and to think as far out as you can go, and then as you put your probabilities on that range, it gets factored in.
Okay, courtesy of Commissioner Page, let's move it.
Yes. Okay, so... yeah. Basically, as I said, this is our first risk assessment. Just my slide here. As we said, all the stakeholders have been here, a lot of involvement. But I also want to let everyone know that this is a new way of thinking when you do risk assessment. You're challenging the folks, engineers and procurement folks and legal folks. With the requirement that what do you think is the chance that this will happen? So people don't tend to think in chances. So it's a whole new mindset in this. And that's going to take some time as we move forward from project to project to sharpen those skills. So with that in mind, I turn the next slide over to
Well, we can
Fred.
stay on this, Ron. I'll take it from here.
Sure.
As Ron outlined in his presentation, this is the third category, which we're calling the semi-quantitative assessment for projects that are in construction. In May, Transit, as Jerry said, with Carter Burgess, and Ron was our facilitator, initiated the first IT project risk assessment. The Sonnet project is most critical in that it creates the new network for other communication and system applications, such as public address, telephone, fax, and video to ride on. The PACIS project, another one many of you are familiar with, as we've talked before, is dependent upon the availability of Sonnet, and it is the next IT project that we will discuss based on the schedule in September. These assessments have such a diverse group of participants, as Ron said, it does encourage a very comprehensive discussion of risks, not just those specific to the project at hand. Currently, Transit's communication network is comprised of copper cables on an asynchronous technology on the fiber optic infrastructure. The Sonnet project has created a new synchronous optical network to replace the network which was installed 16 years ago. The new synchronous high-speed technology gives us the capability of carrying voice, data, and now video. The following 4 slides schematically depict our Sonnet network. The rings are basically closed loops, which will provide alternative paths in the event that a cut in the cable or a disconnect of a switch equipment occurs. The Sonnet project created 2 core rings, C1 and C2, connected to 4 edge rings labeled E1, E2, E3, and 4, and what will be a total of 24 branch loops to cover the system. The boxes represent individual communication rooms. The map shows the rings and how they cover the transit system. Since the cable runs along transit lines, the ring size and shape basically corresponds to a transit's geography. By splicing into the existing fiber cables, equipment installed in each of our communication rooms is connected in a loop design to the synchronous network. A typical branch loop connects a number of stations to the Sonnet edge ring. The second ATM project, labeled ATM-B, will continue to connect the communication rooms along the B division of Transit to the Sonnet network. The Sonnet ATM project is 97% complete. It has struggled through the commissioning phase with delays in developing and executing test cases to basically validate the network. The risk assessment looked at the remaining tasks to complete testing and validation, evaluated the amount of time that it's taken us to get agreement and to conduct the test to completion, the resources needed with respect to the technical knowledge, in-house support costs to review and conduct tests, and other cost items including contingency and pending change orders. And as I said earlier, the other risks outside the project. The risk-informed schedule shown takes into account our previous experience with test procedure revisions and retesting of the major system elements. The major elements are management systems that monitor and control the new equipment. Together with the activities are the individual beneficial use milestones, and for this project there are 5. The first 2 BUs for the project involve the Sonnet core and edge rings. The assessment concluded the major project risks to mitigate as the extended durations to test procedure development and the actual testing. To achieve this, a number of actions have been undertaken. President Roberts initiated executive meetings with the contractor's new chairman to emphasize our commitment to these task completions. Connie Crawford, our senior vice president, chairs a monthly meeting with the contractor's New York corporate vice president and our transit divisions. And at the project level, Transit's chief communications engineer is now chairing and resolving technical disagreements at the test plan review meetings with the contractor, users, and the system suppliers of the individual components. All these actions are in place to emphasize the priority to complete all required testing in realistic timeframes. Also discussed was the risk to utilization of the system from the environment in our communication rooms. A number of rooms are experiencing higher operating temperature ranges. Transit has developed a short-term and a long-term solution. On a regular basis, we have personnel that are inspecting the rooms and changing out filters. We have installed additional portable fans that have been installed in 13 of the comm rooms where we currently are conducting testing. And we are modifying the 40 highest priority locations. For the long term, an evaluation of room condition and use is in progress, and this will lead to additional room modifications in the next 5-year capital program. A formal communication room clearinghouse has been put in place by the Department of Subways to control the allocation of space and the total heat load for comm installations for future initiatives.
Where are we in terms of the remediation in the short term? Are we putting the fans in and finding out that it's working, or
The
where
fans
are we?
are temporary. They're basically to allow us to complete the testing. We have a number of initiatives to actually do permanent work in the rooms. We have basically 4 packages. They're out on the street. We're ready to award the first 8 rooms any day now. We have a number of, the second package is 11 rooms in which we're getting bids from contractors. The next package has already been visited by prospective bidders as well, and we'll have one more remaining package to complete the 40. So that's all underway. The review covered all schedule expectations and an item-by-item accounting of work elements added over the history of the project. The outcome is a range in values which incorporates the risks that were considered. The project's risk-informed substantial completion date is listed as June '09. Every effort will be made to minimize durations so that we can bring the project in earlier. The risk-informed cost is now $219 million, and this includes additional items that we are considering right now for pending AWOS, including additional circuit boards for migrating applications at a later date, additional spare parts, and network support, together with the potential costs that we will incur if the schedule does go as far into '09 as into mid-year.
Is there a percentage probability associated with that June of '09 date?
Basically, it's 90+%. That was a desire when we sat down.
And same
to
for the
look at all.
cost as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
The cost right now is mainly driven by the extended months, which is in the tune of about a little over $1 million in our actual support costs. The other costs are things that we have discretion over, which are the pending AWOS, which are still under review. And that concludes my presentation.
In the final slide, which you might want to see, this is a slide that was presented in the chemical industry after Bhopal, after some risk assessments were done by, in-house for another chemical company. But unlike the white knight, we can't afford to address all risks, but certainly we must address all significant risks.
So just on Sonnet, when we come back to you with Sonnet, what we will be reporting to you on are basically the 2 items that Fred identified here. We'll be reporting to you on the test schedule. You saw all those different boxes were various elements of testing. We'll be reporting to you on how well we're meeting that schedule, because that's a big driver here. And then in terms of just being allowed to ensure that we can bring the Sonnet to substantial completion, how well the temporary measures are doing on the comm rooms to allow that to happen. And then moving forward, you'll see when we do PACIS, the comm rooms will be a dependency there, as will Sonnet. And so those will be items that will be part of those assessments. So that's why we started with Sonnet, because it seemed to lay out the dependencies on which the other projects would rely. So now it'll be clear to you when we come back on Sonnet, it'll be a much more focused update each time.
Is Sonnet going to give you the ability? I mean, one of those slides showed the upper number 1 line, it showed 242, 238, 225, 215, and then it went right into 149th Street. Is Sonnet going to connect lines that aren't connected now?
What do you mean that aren't connected now?
Well, the Broadway line doesn't go through 149th Street, and that slide showed it
You're looking
leading
at how
into...
the cable routing is. And
The
how-
cable
how the
routing will go
circuits-
into that?
How the circuits will flow to form these loops, so information can take multiple paths.
So technically it has the ability to tell a rider, once it's in place on one line, that something is not operating on another line correctly?
You're talking about the information coming from the PACIS?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Once you're on the network, you can go anywhere you want to go.
Connor Burgess, anything you want to add, Jerry, to this?
Yeah, as said earlier, we participated in this, and we were one of the drivers to make sure that every item was accounted for, and one of the drivers to make sure all the events were made sequential instead of concurrent based upon the resources that were available. So we concur with the presentation.
You want any comment on any infrastructure or facilities reports? Well, it's all there.
No, it's all there. Our reports speak for themselves. We have no issues.
Okay. So now we go to capital construction.
Thank you. I'm wondering if rather than go through a presentation, you'd like me to just focus on what I perceive to be our schedule and budget risks.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I heard you loud and clear, sir.
You can see Mark's packing already. We got to keep it going.
On South Ferry, we've recently avoided a budget risk by prevailing on a claim from a contractor that could have had a liability in excess of $16 million. So that's a good thing. In terms of schedule, we're working aggressively to open the station by the end of the year. That requires a couple of things. It requires that we work very closely with New York City Transit on accepting the equipment and the commissioning associated with getting a new terminal facility up and running, making sure that the structure is sound so that the leaks that have been a problem are avoided. And that we are able to have an engineering solution in the event that the work the contractor has done to mitigate those leaks is ineffective in a long term. We need to be ready with a solution. I expect an interim report from an independent engineering firm later this summer, and we'll continue to keep everyone aware of where we are with that. So South Ferry, aggressive schedule. I'd like to keep my team targeted to try to meet that. Agree that there are some risks associated with doing that. And I think that's reflected also in CB's report as well.
That's correct. We think Ronnie is very aggressive with her schedule, and we're slightly conservative more, and so we think there's about a month or so play in the schedule. Based upon the time of year that everything is coming to fruition in. But we want to applaud MTA in their prevailing in that claim because they put together excellent documentation to support their case on that rock claim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Moving on to Fulton. The materials in the agenda reflect no change in terms of budget or schedule information. Those of you who were at our committee meeting earlier today heard me talk about the fact that we're proceeding with the subway work while we're still waiting the outcome of some of the funding solutions. We're ready. We're anxious to proceed for the Fulton Street Transit Center. I'm pleased that we're able to proceed with the subway infrastructure improvements already. The foundation package is on the street. Looks like we're getting good competition there. Over 10 firms are participating with us there. So I'm cautiously optimistic on that.
Ronnie, in the book there was mention of the possible reopening of Cortlandt Street RW. Do you know when that might happen?
We are working right now with the Port Authority on that. There's a relationship to opening the RW station and the Port Authority. For those of you who are familiar with that, it abuts the World Trade Center bathtub. And while the Port Authority was doing some of their preparatory work earlier this year to be able to transfer the sites over to Silverstein, they we had some settlement of the subway, so we need to fix that. And the Port Authority is paying for it, but we do need to get that fixed. And they're doing a pilot program right now to determine the method of remediation of that settlement to make sure that it will do the things that we need it to do, go ahead and do it, and then we'll be more on target in terms of being able to open the RW. But everybody shares that goal. I'm moving on.
No, I just want to add one thing on Fulton Street is that we are planning to do a risk assessment with the AC mezzanine the end of this month. And obviously, when you look at risk and we talk about all the issues, one of the issues that will be discussed at the risk is, do we close the station for a fixed period of time, because there's a huge potential cost savings.
I agree. I should have mentioned that we're on schedule with the risk assessment process.
Repeat that. Close what?
Close the AC platform while they're doing the work for the mezzanine. It means they'll bypass that station and go to
right to
Chamber Street.
Yeah.
But that's an issue with the Department of Subways, and that has to be resolved because there is a substantial cost savings in the overall project if consensus can be reached on closure.
So if you did that, that would mean closing the station platform as well as the mezzanine, wouldn't it? Or would you do that in phases?
No, we close the platform and to do the mezzanine work.
And the mezzanine would remain open?
Yes.
So you could still do all the connections?
Yes.
I think that's an idea that was initially brought up. We'd need to take another look at it. The risk assessment process offers you an opportunity to do that, and I think it's in that context, really, that Jerry raised it. On the number 7 extension, there is no change in terms of schedule or budget information in the book. We're also on target, as Ron had mentioned, to go through the risk mitigation and assessment process later this year. The work is proceeding along the way. If you go along 11th Avenue, you'll see the initial starter tunnel excavation work that's underway. I could show you pretty pictures, but I won't. And we are on schedule for a tunnel boring machine to start mining next year. I think July of '09 is the time period.
And we have concerns with regard to the schedule as presented, and it's written up in our report and described in our report why we have our concerns.
I think it's important to point out if you don't have concerns, and Winton and Ronnie and her people aren't being aggressive enough, so that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
So it's a byproduct. On the 2nd Avenue subway, while there isn't a change in terms of the budget, one element of the project schedule has been extended, which is the design period, and that's primarily to accommodate the repackaging. As a result of the Blue Ribbon panel, we took a look at some of those big station contracts that we were planning and said, no, we've got to break them up. We need the design team to stay on board to be able to do that. In terms of the work itself, we recently met our target. Last week we were able to complete the work that we were doing of utility relocations on the east side of the street on 2nd Avenue between 92nd and 96th Street. That's a very congested area. As much as we've been working with the local businesses who've been impacted and doing a Shop 2nd Avenue and try to maintain a public awareness campaign that those smaller shops were open and we were maintaining access to them, I think they all breathed a big sigh of relief when we finished the work on the east side of the street, are able to swing over, and traffic is now flowing along the east side of 2nd Avenue. So that was a good thing that we were able to meet our commitment to the community to do that in the time frame that we had proffered. Again, the initial phase of that work is in order to create the launch box for the tunnel boring machine. There, we're still on target for September 2009 mining date to hear that tunnel boring machine start. There have been some legal challenges associated with the location of entrances at 72nd Street. And so we're taking a look at that. What we're going to the community board later this week And as a result of being able to change the alignment of the tunnels, we think it presents new opportunities for entrances. If you recall, one of the changes we made was to go from a 3-track to a 2-track station at 72nd Street, provide operational flexibility with some designs of crossover switches above and below the station. And by changing the cavern size, we think we'll have an opportunity to look at some entrances and hopefully resolve those issues without any prolonged litigation that would otherwise impact the schedule there.
I think you're doing a great job on that. Any questions? Keep going.
Thank you.
I just want to say one of the items we brought up in our report is a request for a new estimate and schedule, and we received them this morning. And they'll be under review, and we'll report back to you.
You say ask and you will receive.
Thank you. Lastly, I'd just like to note on East Side Access, the work in both Manhattan and Queens has been proceeding. On the Manhattan front, you may have heard the news last week that we finished the first tunnel run. That's great. We still have the second tunnel run that will be finishing on target in, say, the Labor Day time frame. In Queens, I noted at our committee meeting earlier today that we proceeded with defaulting one of the Queens contractors. There, I think, while a significant amount of work was performed, his schedule was slipping dramatically, and ultimately think it's in the best interest of the project to work with the surety, either to complete, to have the surety come in and perform, work out a financial settlement. In terms of a budget issue, I don't think that's going to be a big risk to us. There's a performance bond on the job. We have not overpaid the contractor or any of those things that can sometimes otherwise get you into trouble when you have a default situation. In terms of schedule, what I noted this morning is let me work out a deal with the surety, and I'll come back to the committees and advise if I think that's a schedule impact. I think there are opportunities to avoid that, but I don't want to be overly ambitious about that at this moment. In terms of the Queens soft ground tunneling, I think Ron noted earlier in his materials that we were going to go through the risk assessment process on that as well. And you'll be apprised of the results of that process too. And that concludes my report, sir.
Anybody got any questions, comments? I want to thank Ronnie and her staff for doing really a great job. Everybody in the room sitting back there, thank you. You've really done great. Jerry?
We concur with the defaulting of the contractor for CQ28. We have a concern, though, on how it will be resolved with the insurance company. Basically, as the record support from the bid process, the contractor for the Northern Boulevard crossing was substantially underpriced compared to all the other bidders at that time, and to the MTA's own estimate at that time. And so that might present some problems with the insurance company, but I'm going to leave that for Ronnie to solve.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Aye. Adjourned. And everybody remember, these next meetings are going to be full jam-packed, so leave a little extra time, please. Thank you. See you in September. And thank you very much again to all the MTA people who did such a great job. Really appreciate it.